So what do we have in common from Splash Mountain to Toontown to Hogsmeade? Let's find out. Hi everyone, welcome back to That Disney Girl. If you're new here, what's up? My name is Alessa and you're here on a very special episode because this is episode 2 of my new series, How to Become an Imagineer, where I speak to Imagineers, talk to them about their life, their history, and then the all-encompassing question, which is how can you become an Imagineer, a theme park designer, someone who works to create these worlds that we all know and love today. But today we have Don Carson, who has really had his hand in all aspects of like themed lands, doing things like I've already said, Splash Mountain, Toontown, worked with Universal theme parks in Disney that didn't end up getting created, different sorts of video game designs. He's done so much stage adaptations of like stage sets. He's someone that I would actually consider as being a jack of all trades when we're talking about creating these themed lands that really just pull you in no matter what sort of medium it's on. Like I said, it could be the stage, it could be your computer, or it could be in real life at a theme park. And I mean, I can tell you all of the research I've done on Don, but I would much rather listen to him talk about it. So let's go and do that and welcome Don to That Disney Girl. I guess for the editing purposes, I should say hi to you again. Hi, Don. How are you?
I am well, thank you.
You're, I feel like, well known, at least in the Disney community, for Splash Mountain, Toontown, and like but you've done everything from like the Renaissance Fair, the like stage show sets, video game design. I feel like you've done so much things that are based in like these environmental landscapes and themed areas. Something on your site when you spoke about a story and an environment, it's like on one of the first pages of your blog, you said that riding an empty train car going down the tracks at night, that's environment, and then riding an empty train car going down the tracks at night with an abandoned briefcase and a smoldering cigar in an ashtray, that's the beginning of a story. And when like that to me is like what makes like a good attraction or a good environment, or like that, it makes it like believable. So like I said, that's a big giant segue to one of the first things that I thought was really interesting that you did, which is the attention to detail sort of book for Disney. So I was hoping you could talk to us a little bit about that, and then also if there was something in that book that really stuck out to you as like just a really good attention to detail, or whatever, a couple things. If you wanted to bring those up as well, that'd be amazing.
Okay, yeah. I'll ramble on.
Go for it.
It was a huge life lesson, so I'll set the scene.
Yes.
That, I loved to draw as a kid. I wanted to have a career where I got to draw. Mm-hmm. And the only thing I could think of that was a potential career was illustration. Mm-hmm. So I was an illustration major in college. And I did not know that there were Imagineers. I didn't know that people designed theme parks. I was just going to go do that. And as soon as I graduated, I realized I really did not like doing commercial illustration work. And I also didn't really like to do finished work. I much prefer doing the rough ideas that then got collaborated upon and brought into something other than just a painting or a magazine cover. So I had a portfolio that looked very much like everybody else's portfolio, and I decided that I was going to do a portfolio that looked like my stuff as opposed to the assignments I did in college. And so I gave myself a deadline of 3 months to do this. And I thought, well, what do I want to fill it up with? Well, what kind of work do I want to do? And I thought, well, I like Disneyland a lot.
Yeah.
My grandmother lived in Santa Ana, and I lived in San Francisco, and we would go down there once or twice a year, and we would go to the parks. And I also love the work of Rian Portfleet, who's most famous for a book called Gnomes, but he did a bunch of other books that were very much like also Dinotopia. They're illustrations with lots of written notes. Mm-hmm. I love that aesthetic. I also love the work of Mark Davis, who also would annotate his drawings with information that would help support the idea that he was trying to communicate. And so I decided even though I was right out of college and was a nobody, that I wanted to do a book of sketches of Disneyland called Attention to Detail at Disneyland Sketchbook. So my wife and I went down to Disneyland. I took like 7 rolls of film when there were film rolls.
That was a thing.
That was a thing. And I came back and I filled 3 months worth of my time producing as many illustrations as I possibly could. And at the time I was working in watercolor. Mm-hmm. So it was about 150 illustrations of doorknobs and horse-drawn carriages and fence posts and all the details that I thought really, really made Imagineering or Disneyland rich and full of story. I didn't know who did it, but I knew that this was great stuff. And so I sent it up in a package, and I didn't know anybody at Disney, so I sent it to the president of Disneyland, who was Dick Nunes at the time. And I thought, I'm never going to hear anything. And about 2 days later, I get a call from Dick Nunes, who I found out later is not someone who does this, but he called and said, I'm really not the guy to give this to, but I'm going to send this up to Bo Boyd up at the Disney Studios, and he's our head of publishing. So off it went, and about 3 weeks later, I got an invitation to fly down to the Disney Studios to meet with them, and of course I thought, oh my gosh, my dreams have come true. They're going to publish my book. I'm going to be so famous. It's going to be great. And so I went down there, and I realized really, really quickly that the main reason that they had me come down was they just wanted to look me in the eye, because they couldn't imagine anybody would produce that much art for a book that they had absolutely no intention of publishing.
True psychopath.
And to tell you how naive I was, in the airplane going down, I think I bought a suit for this thing. I decided that I wasn't going to let them talk me out of my dream, which is to get this book published. So anything that they floated past me, I was going to turn down, because I had this dream of getting this book published. So I got to view the back lot when they had one. I got to eat at the commissary. I got to go down to the archives when it was like a room that was like 20 by 20. It was it was a wonderful time to get to go there. And I was sitting next to a guy at lunch, and he said, I work for this company up the road in Glendale, and they do the other stuff. They don't do just the animations. They do other things in Disney, and I think you'd be a really good fit. Do you have some extra time to go with me? I'll take you there and introduce you to some people, because I think you'd really like it there. And in my little 21-year-old brain, I said, aha, here is one of those times they're going to try to talk me out of my dream. So I said, no, thank you.
Oh my gosh.
I hopped on the plane and I left. Then I found out where he was planning on taking me was I'm wed. And it took me 6 years to get a job there, from where I couldn't conceivably have gotten a job that day. But no, I had turned it down. And what was interesting was that, for all intents and purposes, anyway, that through many, many attempts to get that published, and Disney didn't want to do it, but then Chronicle Books wanted to do it. It didn't get done. The book did not get published to this day. And so I go in 6 years later for an interview, and I lug all 150 paintings with me. And during my interview, they said, "Are you familiar with our product?" And I dropped 150 paintings at Disneyland, and they hired me on the spot.
Yeah, that is probably the best way you can end an interview. It's like, here you go.
Yes, I am familiar with your work. And so from that point on, that was it. And I'd say that what was especially nice about Imagineering was that if you were in the building, they assumed, if you were an employee, they assumed you knew your stuff. So there was never any question about whether you had the chops to do what you were doing. And so, like, my very first job for day one was Splash Mountain. And with very few exceptions, there wasn't a time where they went like, wait a minute, you're 21. You just did a bunch of drawings at Disneyland, and now you're designing an entire attraction? That shouldn't happen. Anyway, and since then, I have found multiple times where those passion projects that have no hope of ever becoming anything financial actually become the bedrock for the next phase of your career. And so I owe it to those 150 paintings that never got published.
I mean, either way, they were going to get you the job. Either it was going to be like 6 years earlier or later. Those paintings were getting you the job. Who
knows? Yeah. Well, and the reason I got the job, I think, above and beyond the illustrations was it was during a hiring blitz. They were basically vacuuming anybody who could hold a pencil.
Yes, that's when Eisner was in charge and stuff.
Yes. So it was called the Chase the Dragon campaign, and employees were given big bonuses if they brought people in. So I got sucked up, and I ended up being there during, I think, a real golden era of Imagineering.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
So I guess, was there anything in that book that really, like, of your favorite details? I mean, there's 150 of them, so I don't know how you pick, but anything that comes to mind that when you saw it, you're like, that's smart.
Ironically, the book would now be a book of drawings of things that aren't at Disneyland anymore.
True.
That is not there anymore. It's evolved, and Disneyland's never done changing, so they're gone. When Bo Boyd at Disney said, basically he said, the main reason we're not publishing it is because you're not a Disney artist. If you were a Disney artist, then we would consider it, but why would we publish a Disney book based on someone who isn't a Disney artist? And so fast forward 7 years later, I write to Bo Boyd and go, oh, by the way, you said this. I just wanted you to know I am now a Disney artist. And he sent me a note back that said, good for you.
Not the satisfaction you wanted, but...
Oh,
Yeah.
Just always humbling.
Makes for a good story, at least. At least you got that out of it.
Anecdotes. I have so many anecdotes.
Yeah, clearly. Oh, I guess we've kind of already been speaking about Splash Mountain. For anyone who doesn't know, this is right? You were the head show designer for the Walt Disney World Splash Mountain.
Right. After it was opened at Disneyland, 2 Splash Mountains were being worked on simultaneously, literally across the hall from each other in the dimensional design department. Jolyn Cicero was in charge of designing the Tokyo Splash, and I was in charge of the Florida Splash. Before
I even kind of dive into Splash Mountain, I was listening to we are talking about Splash, but I was listening to you speak on another podcast, and you were explaining about like how these projects, like you just kind of mentioned, like they just kind of got like doled out. Like in my mind, I'm just imagining like playing cards being like sifted across the room, like you, Splash Mountain, you. Like I just thought that it was just a funny idea in my mind because there are these iconic rides and things that people like go to Disney for, and it was just like, you, don't know you, but you could do this. I mean, I'm sure they know who you are, but that sort of thing.
Well, that was a product of the time, and I was hired the same day I was hired with 5 other people, and around the table when they were doling out the stuff, I was the last one to get my assignment. Everybody else got their assignment first, and every one of them was better than the last.
Oh, wow.
Like, I want to work on that. Oh, I want to work on that. And then they get to me and it's like, oh, we need you to design the 3rd Splash Mountain. I was like, oh. Well, ironically, everyone else's projects were canceled.
Oh, wow.
I was the only one.
If there was one of those projects that you would have wanted, do you remember what it would have been?
Oh, there was Dick Tracy was being worked on. There was the Roger Rabbit Runaway buggy or train or tour bus, I think.
Yeah.
There was a big design because the studio had just opened in Florida. And they were like, oh, this is too small. We need to make it bigger. And so there was a lot of money being sent out for some of the greatest ride concepts, which is a reality of it. There's so many things that don't get built, not necessarily because they aren't great. It's just that, all the planets didn't align financially or whatever, and they just didn't get built. But Splash did.
I mean, good thing you were on that one.
Yeah, once again,
you get to see your finished product every time you go.
Never trust your first reaction.
Yeah. So I guess speaking about Splash Mountain, when you were talking, I've heard you talk about the story, and you said like it's something that should be as easy to follow as possible. And then I love storylines and attractions, and I was just wondering, as someone who like creates stories all the time, how important do you think a story is in the attraction? And then also, do you think, because like you also mentioned how it was like how humans use rulers but critters use teeth, so everything in Splash Mountain needed to be like molded as if a critter did it. So in my mind there's like the main plot of like Brer Rabbit and Brer Bear and like what's happening there, but then there's like subplots happening around almost. And like, how important is that to you, I guess, as a show designer or someone working on an attraction, getting all of those little details in there?
It's sort of vital, and so one of the benefits to doing the second of anything is that you have the hindsight to be able to go look at the first one, and you can kind of ask questions about the choices that were made and see whether or not you would come up with other questions. And so one of the things that we noticed, at least I noticed when I was starting to look at the original one, was that there was certainly the stories weren't widely known who these characters were, and it wasn't always clear as to what had happened. Good rabbit, bad bear, bad fox, good rabbit gets away wasn't necessarily clear to everyone. So was there anything that we could do in the design of our version, since we had a chance, that was going to drive home at the very least that there was a good rabbit, a bad bear, a bad fox, and a good rabbit got away. And then the other thing I realized, and this is something I realized that I've sort of taken into everything I've worked on since, that these projects have hundreds of people work on them. And as a show designer, you're like one of the first people, you and the producer and a handful of other people, are the first people working on it. And every time a new team member shows up, they need to be sat down and told the whole story as to what this project means, so they understand what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm into like my 90th person, and I'm thinking there has got to be an easier way for me to impart this information. So I wrote up a document called the design intent, the design intent, and it was like 3 pages long, and it basically boiled down to design rules that if you're not near me asking me, hey, should we build this? The rules were, there are things that humans built and there are things that critters built. You know, humans use hammers and saws, critters use teeth and lash things together. And so because of those very, very simple principles, hundreds of people very seldom came to me. They were like, got it. And so my job was mainly walking up to them and going, that looks great. Oh, that looks really great. Because they all bought into this idea. So like a lot of the critter houses on the top of the mountain were designed by Chuck Ballou, who was in show set at the time and then has since become quite a well-known Imagineer and designer. But all I had to do was tell him how great they looked. Because he just followed the rules. So, yeah. So it's super, super, super important not only to communicate to the audience, but also as a design principle for the team to rally around.
And it's something that I feel like on attractions, it's not something you're going to notice, I feel like, ever, but it's like subliminally there, and it's the reason you believe that you're in this environment that you're in, because it's just those little things, which is why I'm very obsessed with knowing about them and hearing how they come to life, because it's what elevates attractions in certain parks. So very nice.
It's on purpose.
Yes. I heard that you said you originally focused a lot on like cartoon work, and then you were told that wasn't really going to be something that was going to make a full career for you. Is that kind of on the right vein?
Well, yeah, I guess that is ironic.
I just thought it's so funny.
My career is full of people telling me what I'm doing for a living now was impossible, and not a job you could have. And so, my first day in college was a cartooning class, because I thought, I want to be an artist. I want to be a cartoonist. And the teacher, I think it's like 2 words out of his mouth were, oh, by the way, you'll never make a living. And I thought, oh, well, I guess I don't want to do this then. So I went and did illustration, and here, I was designing a Toontown. So you just never know.
When I heard that, and then when I heard that, I was like, you did Toontown. What do you mean? I just thought it was funny. I wanted to bring that up. And I guess, do you think that your love for cartooning, I guess, played an influence in like making these designs?
I think so. Yeah. I think so. Well, Splash Mountain was pretty much as far as art direction was me by myself. Toontown was a whole bunch of different art directors, super talented. So we were all working toward a similar style. So whether it was Andrea Favilli, or it was Maggie Parr, or it was Marcelo Vignali, or all the other designers, Hani Alasre, we were all leaning toward the same aesthetic. One of the problems I have is that later on in life, people would say, oh, that's a nice drawing, but it looks a little too much like Toontown. And I'd say, I think it looks too much like Toontown because Toontown looks a little like I worked on it. I can't help it. Yeah,
it's your style. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the main things you did work on in Toontown was Mickey's house, right?
Well, no, the first drawing I did was of Mickey's house.
Yeah.
And then I went and did all of downtown was my charge. Downtown and the train station and the exterior of Roger Rabbit. But what happened with Mickey's house was that we did the first drawing, little bungalow, yellow bungalow, and then there was a lot of question internally at Imagineering as to what is that where Mickey would live. And so Hani actually did a whole series of mansions and apartment buildings and every possible thing that Mickey could live in. And then at the end they went, no, let's go with the first one. And that's really all the thinking that went into the decision. It was like, nah, I'll go with that one. So I wasn't even part of it. I just did one drawing, and then that's.
But I mean, it's the one drawing that kind of inspired it. So, I mean, I'm going to say you're part of it.
Another artist actually was responsible for manifesting it in its final form. So it takes the village.
Yeah, it's teamwork. But for the downtown core, was there like a sort of process you guys had to follow in terms of like creating it, or I guess since you're so many of you, like being on that same page but still bringing your own little brilliant mindsets to the whole thing?
Well, originally we thought creating a cartoon world would be super simple, because all we had to do was go back and look at the houses that Mickey and Minnie lived in and Goofy in the old shorts, and then we realized that they actually live in Pasadena. I mean, there's absolutely nothing cartoony about their houses. They look just like a bungalow in Pasadena. And so we're like, okay. And, several years earlier, Toontown appears in Roger Rabbit, the film. And, but in Toontown, humans die.
Yeah.
It's not a safe place for humans to go. So here we're going to build Toontown for humans to go to at Disneyland. So we tried through many iterations, tried to create an architecture that felt friendly and yet also felt like not a brightly colored regular building. And then in that case, there was a design intent written about the laws of physics in the cartoon world. And we used milk containers as the example. So if you fill a milk container up full of air, it still looks like a milk container, but it's a fat one. And if you squeeze the air out of it, it still looks like a milk container, but it's got less air in it. All the buildings follow that same physics base.
Okay. Milk container.
So they're just all big milk containers full of air.
It amazes me how like something that's so like iconic and thing that people love, it's like that came from a milk container. It's just very simple, basic things.
Yes.
So moving on from, you've done a bunch of other things and we'll quickly touch on a few of them. I believe you did work with Universal and like the Harry Potter themed area, Diagon Alley, right? From photos I saw that.
From early on, I was hired as a freelancer to work on the window displays for Hogsmeade. Okay,
so then in Hogsmeade, I mean, when people, like the first time at least I entered, either of the parks and like experienced that themed land, it blew me away, just like I'm sure it's blown many people away.
Blew me away.
Yeah. Did you find that, was there any sort of a difference going between like, not just Disney, but like other sort of like themed areas? And was there any difference and any reason that this one kind of was so like inherently detailed? And not that the others aren't, it's just there is a certain thing about when you enter there that you're like, really, you buy it so deeply that you're in the movie. Yeah.
Well, I think there's many reasons. One of them is certainly the work of J.K. Rowling and her world she created was just so incredibly deep and amazing. Another was that she demanded a huge amount of control over the art direction aspects of that land, as well as Stuart Craig, who was the production designer for the films. And so their demands actually were counter to many of the rules that we sort of inherently know you do not do or do for a theme park attraction. Even as simple as, if you're going to expect 15,000 people to come in here in the morning, you want the doors to be wide open and double doors and lots of air conditioning and no handles. And they chose to, every door is operable. It opens. Each shop holds maybe comfortably 12 people. Yeah. You just don't do those things. But it was those sort of non-theme parky choices that really set that place apart. And both it and Diagon Alley are really the high watermark, high bar set in our industry. And it was a perfect storm of really talented designers on the part of Universal and the really dedicated vision of J.K. Rowling and Stuart Craig to create that.
So I guess like as someone who like designed some of those windows, were you kind of like basing like reading the books and then talking with people and coming up with your own sort of concept after that collaboration kind of happened?
In that particular one, because I was a freelancer, it came really, really late in the process. The land had already been designed, already being built.
And it was like, oh dear, we don't have window designs yet. And so I was given a whole lot of photo reference from the films. I am a lifelong lover of that world. So I just pinched myself raw, getting the chance to work on it in any way. And then one of the lucky things was that when they got the drawings, they were like, great, thanks, boom, and off they went. And so there wasn't a whole lot of like, maybe they won't look like this. And so it's actually remarkable how spot on the drawings and the finished product are. But really, I'm not in an industry we get to stand around in front of things and say, that was mine. It's much more, it's like an orchestra. You get to participate with all these amazing people as they do this great work. So mine was just little windows.
But still, like, it's those little details are the reason that, like, the land works.
It works.
Yeah. Like I said, you've done a million things. I'm also going to be jumping to kind of your like video game graphic design work. So you worked, do you still work there today, IMVU, or still have a hand?
No.
Or
I actually worked for the Hedema Group, had for about 7 years.
Okay.
They were in Pasadena, Phil Hedema, and we do theme park work.
Okay.
From there. But no, so what happened was that when our daughter was born, we decided we're done living in LA. We want to live someplace else. And so I went around to everybody and said, hey, you've invested 6 years into me. You could still use me even if I'm not in the same state as you. And they all assured me that would never happen. And so I was like, okay, I'm leaving the state and I'm leaving my career. And so I thought, what's the next thing that could utilize this sort of tool bag that I had for environmental design? And the video game world was starting to get more and more 3D. And so I got a job in Eugene, Oregon, working for Dynamics, which is a game company. And about a year into working up here, all those companies that said they couldn't use me said, yeah, okay, we could use you. So I proceeded in off and on 25 years of freelance for pretty much everybody, as well as video games. And in 2000, I wrote an article for an online gamer magazine called Gamma Sutra about the missed opportunity of the gaming industry and the theme park industry really could learn from each other, And based on that article alone, I got a sight unseen job for a startup, a virtual world company called There.com. And then my day job became designing a video game, basically chat world. And then my weekends became my other job, which was theme park design. And I proceeded to do that. And then the founder of There moved on to IMVU. And so 2 years after leaving There, I started at IMVU and worked with a lot of the same people, all the while continuing to do the theme park stuff on the weekends. So I did 40 hours a week on video games and then 20 hours a weekend, never sleeping, doing theme park stuff.
Oh my gosh, I mean, like, for many people it sounds amazing. For you, you probably are like, I missed out on years of sleep, but
what was great was that the video game world introduced me to tools that I would never have probably discovered, at least not early on. And I use all the game tools that I had back then on all the theme park projects that I do now. So, and because the rules are so similar, with the exception of you don't normally run around Disneyland with a gun, you are creating environments that tell stories. And being able to, as a designer, to be able to build a land in the concept phase you can run around in a video game engine just makes it a better design process.
And I know you mentioned at the beginning of this little chat that you're someone who likes doing like rough sorts of sketches and like incomplete designs, sort of incomplete like works. But did you find it then difficult to kind of move into video game design, which is like a different sort of like medium in creating these environmental landscapes, or was it a simple transition for you?
Well, the hardest transition was that the theme park world falls under a lot of rules about budget and safety and gravity and all these things.
Yeah.
You're gonna lose your eye, if you do it that way. And I thought in video games, and also you have budgetary problems. There's challenges with you end up cutting a lot of stuff because you just can't afford that. I thought, oh great, video games are going to be great because I can put as many chairs in as I want and many buildings as I want. And I realized that the budgetary constraints are just different. They're, how many chairs can any computer draw at a time, and how many textures are you allowed to use? And I found that creatively there were just as many constraints on the video worlds as there was in the physical world. But it was definitely a grass is always greener proposition. But I was going to go somewhere with this, and it's completely gone.
That's okay. It's me all the time.
Yeah, so whatever. Anyway, it's gone.
That's okay.
So as far as whether or not it was different, I basically forced theme park design on pretty much anything I work on. So
nice.
if they said, "Hey, design menus for a miniature golf video game," I built an entire miniature golf park and would render the ticket booth, and that would be the menu, and then So I've never stopped designing theme parks. It's just sometimes they appear on stage as part of a backdrop for a ballet, and sometimes they're in a virtual world. But it's all the same rules I learned at Disney.
So you started doing the video game work after Disney, right?
Right.
Which is what I thought was funny when I heard about this. Were you designing a Haunted Mansion video game that was like walkthrough? Which to me, I was like, that sounds amazing. You can learn more about the characters. I could go inside of that door. What's behind that door? Like, can you just tell us a bit about that? Because that fascinated me.
Well, any company, and certainly Imagineering is no different, we're living it now, is that there's an ebb and flow to feast and famine as far as just more work than anybody can do, and then it really dries out and people are sort of sent to the four corners, and then they all come back again. And so Imagineering had a lot of people that were all there for the Disney decade, and then the Disney decade kind of didn't happen on the level that they had hired for. And so there was a moment where they thought, is there any other business that we could get into that utilizes the same skill base that this amazing company has? And about the same time, a game called Myst had come out, which, as far as I was concerned, was like a complete mind-blowing game changer, despite the fact that in hindsight, it's just sniffing through photographs of an environment. But I thought there's no reason why we couldn't take our existing Disneyland properties and create the CD-ROM adventures. That one of the complaints early on was that the longest dark ride's 15 minutes, and here's this game that takes 40 hours. How can a ride compete? And I thought, well, it doesn't have to. Maybe there could be a Haunted Mansion game that allowed you to see all the things you saw on the ride, but then also allowed you to go into the doors that you just see, and there was an entire whole rest of the house you got to explore. And the idea was that it was going to be utterly true and supportive of the story being told in the ride, but it would enrich your experience of the attraction. And I think it was too far of a leap, because when your business is making a physical thing to then be told you're going to make a virtual thing, it just didn't click. And so although our little team of 3 people thought it was the solution, because we all wanted to play it, it was sort of lukewarmly received. It was bounced over to Disney Interactive at the time, and they said, "This is great, so what do we shoot at?" And we said, no, this isn't about shooting, it's about exploring. And the game industry just was like,
what is that?
We don't know how to do a game that doesn't involve racking up a score. And so it withered on the vine and died. Good idea, wrong time.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get it, but also I deeply wish it was a thing. But
someday,
maybe I mean, if anyone's watching this, make it a thing.
I'll buy it. Happily do that.
So I have just a couple more little topics I wanted to focus on. I thought I was done talking about Disney, but we're clearly not. So you had a hand in creating something that didn't get created, which is Disney's America, that huge theme park, which I've researched a whole bunch like about a year ago, and I was fascinated by it, just what it could have been. Do you think that, like, because you worked on like Renaissance era type work prior to all of this, did that kind of come into play? What did you do to create this whole like theme park that was literally, I feel like, ready to go, kind of just, but then didn't happen?
Well, the sort of I was just one of many very talented people that were working on it. The idea was, what if you created a sort of a regional themed environment park, history park, that had a budget that was a smaller percentage than an actual theme park. I think Williamsburg was one of those examples, and Renaissance fairs were another example. And I remember thinking, my budget at the Renaissance fair per fair was like $3,000. So the idea of having many hundreds of millions of dollars to do it is like, we could do one amazing Renaissance fair with that amount of money. So that when we started designing it, though, we realized that I think that the engine that creates theme parks, it has a difficulty sort of gearing down to something like that. So it got more and more expensive as we were working on it. Ultimately, what got it canceled was much more political, and where it was located, and it was just one of those things that, despite all best intentions, I think in a different time period it probably would have gone through.
Yeah.
We worked probably a year and a half on that. It was under the leadership of both Steve Kirk and Tim Kirk, who were also responsible for Tokyo Disney Sea after that. And there was a lot of good ideas. I think that, and if we were to do it today, there'd be infinitely more diversity represented than was in the initial design, and definitely was something we were bringing to that project before it was turned off. But that's just the reality of any movie or theme park, is that sometimes they don't get built.
Yeah, I feel like I when I saw it, I was like, this could have been, I feel it's such a good idea for like I guess educational purposes, like how many school trips would have ended up going there. And then now this idea of like, I mean, Disney's about to drop Hamilton, the collaborations that could have happened, like,
and could happen again.
I know. It's funny too, because I was like, at first I was like, no, that's a theme park. Then I was like, no, there's actually some really smart ideas that I feel like no one has ever kind of touched before, if this were to have become a thing. But I mean, interesting to learn about nonetheless.
Yeah.
And then I guess at the moment, something that I've been watching you do is create your own dark ride from scratch, which I'm gonna link your video down below, because it's very interesting to watch how someone can just like, from literally nothing, like render this whole ride and go through it. And when you like draw these characters, and how do you kind of create this story, or is there a story at the beginning, or were you just like, I'm gonna do pumpkin and squash creatures and they will go in there?
So the genesis for that project was I've been doing the very obscure theme park design blog for years. And the articles are just whatever pops into my head from one moment to the next. And one of the things I'd always wanted to do was I wanted to do one where I designed a dark ride from scratch, purely as an opportunity to write about it. At this phase we do this, and at this phase we do that. And I had rationalized that there was just never going to be enough time for me to do that. And then voila, we have a global pandemic, and I'm stuck at home. And I went, well, if there's any time I'm going to do that, I'll do it now. 80% of the work I do is under non-disclosure agreements, and I can't tell anybody or show anybody that my career, basically. And so this was going to be a thing that wasn't connected to an IP, and I wanted it to have really, really strict parameters so that it didn't become a giant Pirates of the Caribbean thing I was doing by myself. And so I chose to have it be basically a carnival ride that shows up on the backs of semi-trucks and then pops up. And also I wanted a theme that I would enjoy spending several weeks or months working on. And I'm not a huge fan of the sort of the gory jump scare part of Halloween. many of my friends adore them. But I wanted to do something that would be sort of an alternative that was fun and funny, but also a little creepy and spooky. And so I just came up with this idea that it was sort of like Carnival Ride meets Small World.
Oh, yeah. It does. I mean, the drawings definitely give it that kind of vibe. Like a creepier version. Kind of like, turned on its head.
That pumpkin people are selling pumpkin pies is just odd.
Yeah.
It's odd. But anyway, so the goal was to show what a design process was, and I think it was also an opportunity to showcase the new tools that I use. So I wanted it to be okay that I'm building this out of paper, and just the way everybody's done it in the past, but then quickly get it digital. And then once it's digital, you have a tremendous amount of freedom for how to consume it. And with virtual reality, you can actually walk around in it.
Yeah.
It's like visiting a ride under construction, and you're only 2 weeks into the design. So I intended to do that, maybe color one scene, and before you knew it, I colored the whole thing. My really good friend Cullen Vance wrote the music for it. I had Stephen Lawrence did some poster designs for it, and Amy Stenstad, a wonderful, talented themed lighting designer I worked with on Splash Mountain in Toontown. She did some lighting design for it. And then one of those things about those projects that you always wanted to get around to, it almost acts like the barrier for your future project. And so kind of like trying to imagine January on December 12th. It's like, it's some obscure concept. I know it's out there somewhere. Someday it'll be January, but I got all this stuff in the way. Well, this ride was one of those. And as soon as I finished the Pumpkin Town project, I sat around for about a week and a half. And then my good friend, Daniel Singer, who goes by Rover, he was a dimensional designer at Imagineering. He and his partner, Kent Ellison, were responsible for Small World for Paris, for Peter Pan, for Tokyo, and for the Roger Rabbit cartoon spin. They did all the models for that. He just offhandedly said, I wish someone would recreate the Alice in Wonderland ride from Disneyland from 1958, which changed in 83. And I said, well, Daniel, you should do it. And he said, no, we've had this conversation. I don't do computers. And I said, well, I do. And so we started on this new project, which we're in the middle of right now, which is we're recreating as best we can, unofficially, unsanctioned by anybody, for the purpose of creating a ride-through of the original Claude Coates designed Alice in Wonderland, and all of its funkiness.
That's, I mean, have you posted photos of this? I feel like I've seen Alice in Wonderland drawings, so I don't know if that's the same project.
So there's some progress
there's a
photos,
couple.
And I actually just this weekend posted a walkthrough of the scenes.
So I will make sure that people are seeing that right now, because they need to. That's spectacular. And how long does it take? Like, I guess for the pumpkin one is the one that, like, it's created from A to B. How long did that take you to do?
About 2.5 months, and I had a full day job, so it was weekends and evenings, pretty much. A lot of it was done on an iPad in front of the television after dinner, just drawing, and then brought in. And the advantage of doing it in paper and then scanning the paper is I already had the textures, so when I did the color version, I just swapped the texture.
Okay.
Voila, I had a full color thing. So that's what we're doing with Alice, and it's a much bigger project than Pumpkin Town was. So I've actually got some incredibly talented friends, all ex-Imagineers, that are lovingly taking some of the scenes and interpreting it. We've full rein for them to look at the little material we have and come up with their sort of interpretation of the scenes. And also there's a huge fan community out there who've been squirreling away little bits and pieces of information. So every once in a while we'll get this another puzzle piece, and there'll be some inconsistencies because corners we don't have documentation on. But all in all, I'm pretty confident you'll feel like you're riding the original ride.
I'm so amped right now about that, because it's bringing something back to life that, like, at least I've never seen, and I would never get to, like you said, see the full thing. This will be, I guess, the best idea of what it would be like if you could ride it today, which is very cool.
It's definitely an archaeological project. We're pulling stuff that's not super well documented. But I think really what inspired us was the group that did the Journey to Inner Space have created a VR version of their ride through. They've had a regular desktop version for many years, and having been old enough to have ridden that original one, it was a time machine back to my childhood riding around in that attraction. And if our little attempt is that for someone else, or just a glimpse at the way things were done, then it was worth every second.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be for some people a time machine and like nostalgia and a way to go back, and for people like me, a way to see what was what it could have been, something that I missed. So
Right.
I'm very excited. Kudos to you guys.
I will say, I'll be the first to say that the new version is infinitely better. So it's not like they ruined an old version and the new one is great. The old one had constraints of budget, and but they were done by the hand of some one of the 9 old men and other famous Imagineers. So it's an homage to them and to that first dark ride.
I've said it a million times. I'm very excited.
As am I. Yes.
So the final question I have for you, this little series that I'm doing, it's called How to Become an Imagineer. So that's the last question I ask is, what advice do you have for people who not even just want to become an Imagineer, but someone who works in theme park design, I guess, as a whole, because there's similarities no matter where you're going, I'm sure. What would you, I mean, aside from like painting 150 doorknobs and then bringing it to your interview, would you have any like places to start? I mean, I feel like you've kind of you're teaching like the upcoming generations by doing things like creating your own dark rides and showing people how to do that, and you can do that in 2.5 months, and that's something that I imagine would look very good in a portfolio, to be like, look, from start to finish here.
I know how to do this.
Yeah. So I guess what's your advice? I'm spieling on, but yeah, that's basically all I'm asking.
Well, first of all, if you desire to do this work, you've probably been bitten by whatever bug it causes one to want to be in this very weird, obscure business. So I have sympathy for you, because I did too. I did not have mentors. Didn't even know it was a job you could have, before. So myself and other Imagineers that are old and gray and involving are all actively working to try to at least leave the breadcrumbs out for people who want to do this kind of work to potentially follow. We're very lucky in that there are several universities in the U.S. that have programs, SCAD for one, Ringling another, and I think CalArts also has themed environment design courses. So if you can do it, that's a great way to learn about it. I'd say another thing is that Disney feels a lot like Everest. It's the mountain we all want to climb, and I would say that's a good goal. But there's a lot of companies that do this work, and if really your desire is to take people away into the stories you build physically, then aim your view wide, because a lot of these companies are owned and filled with ex-Imagineers or Imagineers in process of being an Imagineer and going back to Imagineering. It's a very, very close-knit, small industry, and so I'd say go for it. Learn the stuff and get a job at one of these many companies, and it may end up at Imagineering or it may not. My 6 years there were like the best university I could ever have gone to, and I have friends that I've had my whole life, and I still work with. But some of my happiest times have been working outside also. So I would recommend that. And the other thing I would recommend is that that same bug that makes you want to design places and teleport people into your stories, we have a technology now to allow you to design that without it necessarily be poured in concrete. So Pumpkintown is certainly an example. And I would have said before I started it that the intent of that was to be nothing more than a one-off. Look, I built this thing and you can ride it. But I've had numerous people say, I get up in the morning and I ride Pumpkin Town a couple of times, just to start my day. And I've been thinking about it. I'm thinking maybe there's an opportunity out there to use ride as another form of entertainment, because I think physiologically we change as we nestle into a ride vehicle and go on a ride. Think about your skills being used for both physical and virtual attractions, because I have a feeling that if you're thinking about going into this career, that you might end up doing both, and realize that the opportunities to still tell stories and transport people into them, utterly surrounded by all the magic that you see at a Disney park, might be happening in a non-physical way as well. And so I say, do it. Go do that.
Well, I think that's great advice, and also what you're saying. I think that's amazing that people are riding Pumpkin Town when they wake up in the morning. But it is true when you see on like YouTube, people like to go through and like ride like POVs of different attractions and see that, and what's really the difference between like a VR version, a real life, like they could basically be the exact same thing with the way technology is now. And people love doing that. I mean, I do that sometimes if it's like, I'm like, I just want a quick moment of like magic of some sort of, just take me somewhere else. So I definitely could see that being something that's more predominant in like
form of escape. Sort of release yourself from having one be better than the other, because obviously going with someone and breathing the same air in Pirates of the Caribbean cannot be topped in a digital way in any way or form. But it doesn't mean there aren't other stories that could be told in this new technology. So be open to the new tools.
I think actually anyone who's riding your Pumpkin Town ride, if they want to take it a level up, maybe light like a pumpkin spice candle as they're doing it, and then they'll have like a smell that's wafting it at the same time. If we really want the breathing the air aspect of it,
That's exactly right.
But that's basically, that's all the questions. I mean, I could ask you questions forever, but anyone who, if you're still watching this, thank you. I mean, thank you so much for talking to us about all of the wonderful things you have done in your career and everything, and giving this advice. And thank you so much for coming and talking to me on my channel. It's really been a pleasure. It's like, this has been great. I'm like grinning ear to ear. Well, I mean, I look forward to Alice and seeing that whole creation, and I mean,
what happens after? I don't even know.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I'm excited to see whatever it is.
Yes, I am too.
Well, good luck during this time of quarantine. I mean, slowly we're getting back out slowly. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Okay, thank you.
Have a great evening. Bye, Dawn.
Bye. Bye.
Okay, you guys, so like the good YouTuber I am, I forgot to do an outro, so I'm just gonna do it like this right now while I am editing the video. But I want to give Dawn a nice big thank you so much for coming on today and talking to all of us. And if you liked the video, you gotta make sure you give it a nice big thumbs up. And if you want to talk about what you learned in the video today, or any questions you might have for future Imagineers, we can continue that discussion down below in the comments. And of course, if you like everything Disney, you gotta make sure you're subscribed to the channel, because we talk about Disney stuff all of the time. But until next time, folks, I will see you all real soon. Bye, everyone! Also, I feel like the camera is like slowly shaking right now because this thing's heavy and I never vlog.